Hello and welcome to this month's MPW web series. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Robb. I'm the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be hosting this session tonight, a really exciting session for me, and we've got an amazing panel literally spanning the globe, and I'll introduce those in a moment as we get ready to discuss moving the start line. Digital and technology first, then physical. But in the meantime, why don't we start by doing the introductions. As I said, we've got an amazing panel today that has joined us from literally almost east to west. It's going in alphabetical order though, starting in Mumbai in India with Ashish Bhushan, who's the founder and CEO of Chapter 3 Technologies, an old friend of MPW who's been giving me great support in the preparation for this webinar. Wonderful to see you, Ashish.
Wonderful being here, Chris. Thanks for having me over.
Thanks for making the time.
Being part of MPW initiatives.
Wonderful. And an even older, not in terms of age, but in terms of years of working together, friend of MPW. A very late night for her, joining us from Melbourne in Australia, where it's already past 10 p.m. Wonderful to have Caroline Darcy, the former global head of sponsorship and events, which also involve platforms, from Standard Chartered Bank, now with her own consultancy firm out of Melbourne. But wonderful to see you, Caroline.
Hi, thanks, Chris. I'm glad you clarified the old bit. Hi, everyone, and Merry Christmas. I've got my Christmas tree up. I was explaining to my fellow panelists that we literally didn't have a Christmas because of COVID. So I'm about to have a series of Christmas events that will postpone from December. And I thought I'd put my Christmas lights on for everyone. So lovely to meet you all. And thanks for the invite, Chris.
Yeah, wonderful. That's always something I used to love doing in Australia. When I was in Sydney, we'd go up to the Blue Mountains for Christmas in July in the midst of the Australian winter, which is fantastic. Joining us from New York, also an Australian though, but living in New York, Melissa Lawton, who's the Chief Content Officer at SailGP. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here. I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, great. Really looking forward for your insights. Obviously SailGP at the moment, but time with Red Bull and time with Meta. So some great insights that I'm sure we're going to hear from you. We have on the schedule Nikhil Arora, who's the Managing Director and VP of GoDaddy. He's usually based out of Delhi. He's currently in London, and he's got caught up with something. It's possible that he might not be able to join us, but he's going to be doing his best to join us after half an hour, so we'll welcome him if he's able to make it. And then absolutely delighted to also welcome an old friend of MPW. We met in Singapore probably 4 or 5 years ago. Scott Hill, the Executive Chairman of Play On Canada, joining us from another London, but London, Ontario, in Eastern Canada. Great to see you, Scott.
Thanks so much for having me today, Chris. It's just really an honor to be here. I'm really looking forward to it. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And a wonderful and very relevant case study that you have around what you've done with Play On, and I'm sure it's going to be hugely valuable. As always on an MPW webinar, the way to communicate, please, in the chat and the Q&A. If you've got any questions, please, I'll be monitoring that as we go through the conversation. We are recording live on Facebook, and the recording will also be on MPW Academy within a few days, and we've got over 100 hours of free content there. So if you haven't already registered to be a member there, it's free to join. Go and have a look and sign up for that. We are delighted that as well as live streaming on Facebook, we're also live streaming into China, and a big thanks as always to Julia Chui, Jerry and Huao from the CGX consulting team there that are managing that for us. Some quick MPW initiatives are twice a month MPW Global Updates, the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. We had one last Tuesday, talking about revenue challenges and opportunities, some really great insights from across the globe there, and that's on MPW Academy. The next one is on the 14th of June. The next MPW web series is on the 30th of June, and the common challenge I'm hearing is around revenue and cash flows and many of the business challenges, so we're going to be focusing on that. As always, very happy to help you out. If you'd like to contact me, through social channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, or directly chris@massparticipationworld.com. And then of course, if you're not already signed up, the Road Ahead, our weekly newsletter that goes out with all the details around it. But yeah, really keen to get into the meat of it now. We've got a bumper session tonight of an hour and a half. Not all of our panelists are going to be able to stay the duration, but we're really, because it's such a big topic that we could speak for many hours on, we thought we'd push it up to 90 minutes. We, in terms of our preparation, Ashish and myself held a little focus group last week, and a big thank you to Chuck, Julie, Mike, and Sandeep who joined us for that. We were hoping, again, not playing the age card. We've got some great insights around younger people. We'd hoped to have a 12-year-old friend of mine that was going to join, but she got caught up. So, but we've got a great perspective, I think, of a range of participants from serious age grouper to park runner and back of the packers. So we're going to play a couple of very short little videos of that during the session in terms of their insights. And I guess the background as to, why did I choose this as a topic? I have been saying for a while, and if I hark back to 2019 at MPW conference in Singapore, the biggest conversation topics, both on the stage and off the stage, were the broken business model or the challenge business model. It's not absolutely broken in every market, but in some markets, people were really struggling back then. And COVID was, I was kind of using the term 1 foot on a banana skin, and I think COVID ended up being that banana skin. And whilst it's presented enormous challenges, I think it also presents amazing opportunities. And I think we have this need that I've now, a phrase that I've started to coin over the last couple of weeks, mass participation 3.0, the next evolution of the mass participation industry, deliberate pun on Web3, but, there's obviously the jury's out on many parts of that, but undoubtedly technology and all of those parts that come with Web3 and the blockchain are going to present amazing opportunities for our event. So, Ashish and myself, and I give the credit to Ashish, this was his idea in terms of a title, but, I think as an industry, we tend to focus very much on the race, the event, whatever we call it. And I'm not saying we should throw that away, but I'm kind of asking, and we're asking the question, as I say, Ashish's idea, what if the lens went completely the other way around and we said digital and technical first, and technology first, sorry, and then physical? What might we be able to learn? What are the opportunities? And again, asking this question, are we delivering races and events, or are we building communities, providing health and well-being, and is purpose at the very core of that? And are we providing platforms for people to engage and deliver on purpose? So we've got kind of 7 broad buckets, but I always like these to be, as those of you that have attended and some of you that have been on panels with me before, like Caroline and Ashish, I love them to be conversational. Please put your questions and observations in the chat. And the broad buckets, we're going to start off by literally just going around the room, asking everyone to give their kind of 2-3 minute observations on the topic. We're then going to talk about health and well-being as a central motivation. We're going to talk about the opportunities to potentially create wellness influencers. And some of you will be aware of the research that we did. MPW, the PTO, supported us on that, and with a group called the Neuropower Group out of Australia, which was called the Mass Participation Ripple Effect. And it was focused around health and well-being in terms of how does each individual participant impact other people in their circle. And when we sat down with Peter Bureau, he said that he thought that we'd be able to prove that would be 10 people for every participant. We did a 3-month desktop study, and the research showed that could be as many as 200 people per person, because it's compounding rather than linear. So we asked that, could each one of those participants be an influencer, particularly harnessing digital and technology? And then, the all-important thing, which we'll obviously touch on, is how do you commercialize that? And I had the conversation with Caroline. Standard Chartered has this huge portfolio of mass participation events, 50,000 participants in the Singapore Marathon. But what if I, as the rights holder, went and said, I've got 50,000 engaged participants, and I've got, pick a number, 200,000 engaged fans of those participants? How much more appealing and commercializable is that for a brand, and how much more commercializable is it for a rights holder? So that whole opportunity around wellness, influencer, purpose I've touched on already, and then obviously the whole technology piece. How do we link these all up? Gamification, those kind of things, the role of data linked to that, and then obviously the all-important part of commercialization and how that brings collaboration and partnerships into the mix to make sure that that we're making money and building a better business model around this. So why don't we, with that said, enough of me talking. Let's hand over to the panelists, and I'd love to start, if I may, with you, Scott, because yours is a fascinating story that I think is just being repeated in many parts of the industry at the moment, and love to get a couple of minutes of you setting the scene from your perspective.
Well, thanks, Chris. I mean, just so others are aware, I come at the mass participation industry after operating in the industry for 15 plus years, but not even knowing there was such a thing as a mass participation industry. I actually didn't learn the phrase mass participation until I went to the conference in Singapore and
the same. I'm exactly the same. I was like, Chris invented the word, I think.
And aren't we all fortunate?
Yeah.
Anyways, the space that we've been in, I'm in Canada, and I don't have experience outside of just this one event, but I operated it for a really long time, and it's in the team sports space. So it's mass participation, but team-based. And we use street hockey as our tool, and street hockey is an important kind of part of Canadian heritage and culture, and an introductory kind of form to allow so many young Canadians to get into this sport that so many Canadians happen to love, which is ice hockey. And our target market really is youth, and principally, the 14-year-old male is really the core of who we reach. So I realize that maybe a little bit different than some other mass participation events that that many of our guests today are more familiar with and experienced with. But essentially, we were partnered with an organization called the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and they funded us for 15 years. And due to a landmark disruption in NHL broadcast rights, those rights were transferred to another major telecommunications company, Rogers, and we lost our funding partner, we lost our media partner. We were in 22 cities, we were running on a $6 million budget, and we lost 65% of our budget instantly. And so we had over 50,000 participants across the country, and who knows how many spectators, because our events, were quite large and not gated. So, anybody could come and watch. And so anyways, that was our situation. And our model broke, overnight. We were basically on the top of the mountain and we got swept off. And we're forced to try to figure out, okay, how do we find a way to deliver this project so that the people can keep playing, when really it wasn't commercially viable anymore. So that kind of was our story in 2017. And that, I guess, led me to this path where I recognized that, we needed a model that wasn't dependent on a sponsor or a media partner. We needed a model that we could control. And so I recognized, obviously, that technology was the solution, but the technology we needed didn't exist yet. So I guess that's kind of a bit of a background on my lens, and it's great to share with the industry my experience and also learn from others. So I'll stop there for now, Chris, but that's a little context on us.
Wonderful, thanks, Scott. And certainly, just to clarify, I can't take the the credit for inventing mass participation. It was around before me, but I think one of the things that we will touch on, not all of them, but one of the things you identified was you found 14 problems with your model, and you've kind of taken those, and we're going to touch on 5 key ones today. But I think if much of our industry were to do that deep dive, they'd be able to identify many of the similar problems. Let's come down to you now, Caroline, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Sure. Yeah, and I thought I'd just sort of touch on, I'll give an example of my time at Standard Chartered as Global Head of Sponsorship and running the partnership, the front of shirt sponsorship with the Liverpool Football Club. And just an example of how sort of, with COVID and having to pivot. So when I joined Standard Chartered sort of just over 3 years ago now, I was sort of asked to look at how we were activating this multi-million-dollar partnership. Were we doing it the right way? And Standard Chartered is a bank that's headquartered in the UK, but most of its clients, it's an emerging market bank. So most of its clients sit in Africa, Asia, or Middle East. And that's a long way from Liverpool's home ground, Anfield. So when I looked at sort of how we were engaging, and there's thousands and thousands of Liverpool fans, particularly in countries like, Indonesia, etc., that are also our clients. So we knew that there were lots of fans. We knew that they were our clients. How were we engaging with them? And we're really using the old model of physical events. So physical events in market. And we also knew that probably 90% of those clients were never, ever going to get to Anfield. So when COVID hit, it was kind of a blessing for us in terms of our activation, because, when you work for a bank, it's highly regulated, bringing in new technologies, etc., particularly when it's dealing with clients, when it's dealing with cross-border. Like if I'd gone to, the CEO of the bank and said, I want a platform that can engage with all the thousands of Liverpool fans in Indonesia, Africa, Asia, Middle East, it probably would have taken me years. But and that was what was needed. That was what was needed of the partnership. So we had a little bit of a silver lining, I guess, from COVID, because COVID hit. Then the bank had to mobilise 70,000 employees, and I think they did it in something like 3 weeks, which once again is unheard of. All those regulatory issues, obviously, that they were dealt with in a different way because of the circumstances. So we were then left with this really, really sort of strong engagement platform that then allowed us actually to become digital first. And then we started engaging with the fans in these markets, and it was hugely, hugely successful. But we probably couldn't have achieved that in our market unless we'd had the pandemic, to be honest. And now sort of, then post sort of COVID, we were looking at, okay, what role does digital play? Is it still digital first? Is it going back, particularly when you're looking at activation and events, etc.? We knew we had to bring physical back in, because sports sponsorships are all about passion. It's all about that close interaction. So we kind of landed somewhere in the middle with hybrid. So we were running digital. We had this incredible digital platform called Inside Anfield. We kept that going, but we started to bring in physical events. But it was quite an incredible experience, because we wouldn't have got to that place without the pandemic, and that allowed us to be sort of much more sort of, I guess, digital savvy with our fan engagement.
That's wonderful, Caroline, and I'd love to come back to that in a little bit. Recognizing that there's probably some people sitting on the call, small operators, saying, "Okay, that's a big bank with big budgets. They're able to do that," and I'm sure that there's some lessons in there that are relevant to the smaller organisations. And I'd love to come back and pick up on that as we move through. Why don't we come up to? Thank you, Caroline. Why don't we come up to you, Melissa? And again, as I shared, you've got this broad experience across Red Bull and Meta and now with Sail GP and working with the likes of Ironman. Love to get your insights, please.
I can even go back further than that. I produced the Standard Charter Singapore Marathon and I'm trying to remember the dates. It's so long ago. I think it was just before I went to Red Bull. And I remember it was quite a pivotal moment, because I literally just had the offer from Red Bull to move to Salzburg, and I was living in Australia. It must have been 2012, 2013. And the 100% of the focus of being a producer back then was the broadcast. That was where your money was coming from. That's how the participants found out about the event. It went for hours. There were 50,000 sort of runners, and a lot of money spent on doing a massive broadcast. And, it was a legacy event, one of the big ones. And then I went to Red Bull, and Red Bull's focus was just entirely different. While broadcast was important for that halo effect, where the company was really moving was like digital activations, organic communications, and marketing, which all happens before the start line. And while I was there, Dietrich Mateschitz, the head of Red Bull, had just an amazing idea to do something called Wings for Life World Run, and it was starting from scratch. It had no legacy. It had no previous history. It was a race that started at the same time, didn't matter where you were in the world, and everyone ran together, and it was the person who was running longest after that period of time. Really unique concept, and you may never have heard of it, but it got some really decent numbers. But it was a very difficult, to broadcast that was difficult. So it was again very heavily reliant on how is my website set up, how am I encouraging people to do it, and obviously even back then, getting people to the start line at 4 a.m. in Australia is difficult. So they gave alternatives to run in that race, and the alternatives were that you did a selfie run. You ran by yourself, you recorded your times, and you entered into a different category that was entirely based on an honor system, but people still got the bragging rights of, I ran X number of hours, or I ran this far last year, and this year my aim is to run that far. And then purpose was behind it. They were running to for those who can't, which are the people who had spinal injuries, and it was a fundraising activity. What I learned from there, and then going to Meta, and again, we had mass participation as one of our key growth areas, because what we saw is community of involvement. So Facebook started something called Facebook groups, where people could come together and really talk about things that are important to them. And what we saw, especially in the Ironman field, was like hundreds and hundreds of groups just dedicated to talking about participating in an Ironman event. And some of the people in the groups may have only ever participated in one, but it was a key part of their life and something they were really proud of. So the group served sort of two big purpose: to just people who wanted that nice warmer effect of talking to other people who had similar experience, but also that's where we saw the development of micro influencers, fit fluencers, coach fluencers, all these different micro people, as you said at the start, like they can have an influence on a lot of people. So having the digital broadcast, because they moved from a big documentary on NBC approach to really focusing on a stream, which was like revolutionary for the sponsors as well. It was really hard for sponsors to understand, like taking away something that was big for them to something they felt couldn't quite be as big. But what they found is they had a massive connection to the individuals who were participating in the event, which allowed them to do retargeting for other purposes later on. So the getting people to the start line, I really felt was very much that prior to the event, that long-term feeling of community, of how to train, how to do better, how to raise money, purpose. Because I think one thing that COVID has done is made people feel lonely and they want to participate. Travel might still be making it difficult for participation. I've been on a number of flights that were cancelled or moved recently, and pushing people into a community that's online and activating that is a really, really easy way to keep your event alive, even if they can't make it.
Fantastic! Wow, what a tie back to Singapore. I'm sure our paths must have crossed as well. It's it's amazing, small world, isn't it? Yeah. And it's interesting that we talk about, and maybe we can come back to this as well, but to pick up on one of the things you said there about community. I was on a call last week with Sam Middlehurst, who'd been known to quite a number of people on this call, created the Music Run, one of the real thinkers and innovators in our industry, I believe. And we were discussing is, what is a community? Because you've run in the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon, are you a member of a community, or are we an opportunity here? And the point that you made, and we had Ben Burchuk on a couple of weeks ago talking about, more communities on Facebook in America than there are for the NBA. Are we a community of micro communities where maybe the event is the center of the hub, and there's got to be spokes out to all of them? So we I think as events often say, well, we've got this big community, we got 50,000, 100,000 people, but we're not really able to engage with them on communities on such a great level. But you've got so many micro communities, and I'm sure that comes back to part of the data conversation that we'll have later as well, is really understanding your fan and understanding that opportunity to segment them. And Scott's nodding away, and I'm sure he's going to be able able to share. But let's give Ashish a chance to come into the conversation. Thanks, Melissa. Ashish, over to your thoughts, please.
Yeah. So, Chris, you've already set the tone for what the discussion will be about. I just wanted to say that absolutely, on one end, you spoke about the broken business models, but I personally feel that this is a really exciting time for some amount of reinvention, transformation. I think there's a significant opportunity, for the industry that presents itself by being technology and digital first. Just for the benefit of people, my own introduction. I've spent many years with corporate India, with companies like Accenture and the Times of India, which is a large media company here. And, as part of consulting and as part of my Times of India days, I was involved in a lot of sort of, events of various, shapes and forms. Around that time, I took to running also personally, quite enjoyed it, saw various entrepreneurial ventures in the health and wellness space. Also been associated with ProCam, who are really pioneers in distance running in India with the Tata Mumbai Marathon and multiple other properties. So with that as the backdrop, I think in my early days in my own venture, I attempted to do something which became a starting point for a lot of my own thinking and what I'm currently doing, which was I created a physical event called Run for Your Campus, which was really around working with educational institutions in India that have very large physical infrastructure and sort of saying, can we organize runs of various sort of formats within your campus and bring in alumni, students, and a whole host of other communities for them. And while on one end, I think the good news was that one segment of educational institutions was very keen to sort of, open their doors, but reality is that a physical event structure was just not working. To be honest, those were mistakes that I made in my early days. And that's when I sort of said, maybe, the need is there, but we need to think about what might be the two anchors, 2 to 3 important pillars. And so like, Chris, of late, what I've sort of realized is that a community first approach and a technology first approach is where I believe significant opportunity sits, where on one end, and these are your words, Chris, I've heard from you earlier, but something very close to my heart, initiate the uninitiated. I actually feel that while, of course, events and apps and devices and a whole host of products and platforms are really catering to this fitness enthusiast which sits at the top of the pyramid. But in many ways, my own observation is that that's a small segment, right? If you look at the larger population of the world, I mean, there are a lot of people out there for whom wellness is important. They're taking smaller steps. Maybe, big events and technology and some of those other things might be intimidating for them. But the question is, how can technology become accessible? How can that allow more and more people to come into the fold and take to, wellness? So that's been, one theme. And like I said earlier, I think if technology and digital first can allow physical events to also be co-opted, then I think that's a powerful combination. So that's just been, my observations over the last couple of years, Chris.
I could jump in there. I think wearables give you the opportunity to run events at a distance now, like to bring everyone into a city and operate a massive event from a purpose perspective is a little difficult. It's, you're flying people in, carbon footprints, everyone sees the empty plastic cups on the road after the event's been completed. There's, signs that you need to make, dressing, all that sort of stuff. There are, some of the biggest influences we've seen, especially in the TikTok space, were, a woman who just started training for a marathon, and the marathon got cancelled 2 years in a row, and people are just following her because she just kept running. And that can be tracked with, again, it's the honor system is probably the biggest problem, because, what's the honor? People can cheat, get on a skateboard, do whatever, but there is something in that you can do it for yourself. And somehow they just need the platform to record and have those bragging rights after the event.
And I agree, Melissa, because that's also virtue signaling as well. so that,
Yep.
you know, it's sort of putting your sort of position out there. And I think it's yeah, a really important aspect, actually, that probably needs to be looked at more.
Yeah, I mean, oh, Chris, you're on mute.
Carry on, Melissa.
Sorry, I was just saying you were on mute.
Thank you. So why don't we? Because I think, you know, what we've heard is going to be backed up by the conversations that we had. Let me just bring up the first conversation that we had.
For me, triathlon at the moment, it's opened up a whole new world for me. So it was strange that you're meeting strangers on Facebook, and we've now grown to a group of over 300 women in our Singapore Women's Triathlon Club.
It's about the sharing experience. I go to parkrun in Wimbledon mostly because there's a lot of friends and people I know who do it, so it's community as well.
I also enjoy the health benefits that come with it, and some me time, clarifying my thoughts, work, personal, and all of that.
I'm slowing down. I'm still do races. I do not like the virtual races. I enjoy running with people.
I was really keen on using these races as my travel plans, you know, holiday, sports holiday kind of thing.
And what I saw was Couch to 5K was the number of people that I knew that had never run before, my daughter included, who picked up Couch to 5K. But then, because we then ended up in sort of lockdown 2 and lockdown 3, the momentum got lost. And it's kind of interesting how maybe we've missed an opportunity, but I kind of wonder, you know, Couch to 5K, how's that connected to the rest of what goes on?
Some of these possibilities and opportunities have emerged during COVID because of all these virtual things. So alumni run, and, you know, a run for a voluntary group, and or, you know, a charitable cause. And it gets me, in some sense, kind of connects me to something larger.
I started fundraising for Alzheimer's, and I guess the pinnacle was when I turned 70. I did a major fundraising of running 73 events in the space of 6 months.
So 73 events in 6 months and $200,000 raised, and, you know, I think that also highlights, you know, some of the amazing content, and I'm sure that's going to come up during the course of the conversation, as well as we welcome in Nikhil. Hello, Nikhil. Wonderful to see you.
Hi, Chris. How are you? And hi to everybody else on the panel.
Great. Thanks so much for making the time. I know it's a crazy schedule that you've got in London. I'd love to give you a little bit of a chance just to give us some insights. We each of the panelists, we literally had just finished before we played that video, you know, their take on the topic. And I think you bring a fascinating perspective of it from, you know, a participant as an Ironman and a marathon runner, as obviously someone who deeply understands digital and technology, and also, you know, a brand from a GoDaddy perspective who sponsored lots of sport in India, and maybe just a couple of minutes on your take around that, please.
Yeah, I think, and Chris, if I may just kind of make sure I'm setting the context, we're talking about the impact of digitization on this industry of wellness, sports, and fitness and thereabouts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So digital first, event later.
Yeah. So I think you know, what's transpired with everybody is seen is that, you know, the shift from suddenly an offline to an online world, which happened in the last 2 years, right? I think many of the organizers, many of the stakeholders weren't prepared for that, right? And I think what happened was that there was immediate rush to do, for example, video conferencing events, or trying to engage audiences through, you know, through these kind of platforms. And my panelists would have touched on many things, but I think one opportunity which still lies ahead, and which I really want to double down, is the opportunity to include women empowerment in the sports and the fitness and wellness industry. Because if I remember, when the first 2-3 video conferences I started attending, nobody thought that this is the perfect opportunity in the world to break down those barriers, right? Because obviously, when you think about women inclusion in the sporting world and in the wellness world and in just generally in this whole world of sports management, still there's ways to go where we can really push hard, right? And this digitization presents a wonderful opportunity because geographically now it doesn't matter where you're sitting. And as and when you include the stakeholders which have not been like today, generally the inclusion is about 15-20%. If you look at the stat worldwide, of any digital events which are happening when it represents to women representation. And I think in this wellness world, I think women are equally and more important part of whether they're on the management side or whether they're on the participant side, right? So I just wanted to make sure that point comes across because I've not heard a lot being talked about that, right? In terms of the industry overall, I think what I see happening is I think with what digitization presents is the opportunity to drive the engagement a lot than it's ever been before. Because what offline world did was people will come participate in the events and they would go about their own business, right? Now I think with digitization, I think you can have a continuous engagement with your stakeholders, whether they're participants or whether they're sponsors or whether they're other ecosystem players, and that provides an opportunity to have almost I would call it 24/7 cycle of building on anything you're doing, right? Whether I think I saw in a video on fundraising, right? I mean, fundraising is another great example where it was very hard to take your message out to stakeholders in different parts of the world. Now all you need to do is get online and have that message out there. But I think in my view, the biggest win is going to be this continuous engagement, which you can build upon now versus before it was a one-time transactional opportunity to do the event on that day.
Thank you very much, Nikhil. Let's pick up on that health and well-being and that engagement around that, and maybe let's come back to you, Ashish, and share a little bit about what you've been seeing, that engagement in the community. We were on a call the other day, and maybe to give a bit of that background, the power of that health and well-being within community, and some of the multipliers you've been seeing on the ActHive platform that you've built, which I think presents an opportunity for our industry.
Yeah, Chris. So there's a data point I wanted to share, which of course is an India data point. I know these numbers will look different in different parts of the world. So, a recent research report says that out of about 477 million people in the workforce in India, about 15% are part of an organized corporate wellness initiative. All sorts of, health, insurance and gymming access and telemedicine, all of that is being offered, but only 15% are part of it. I think the backdrop is what can really mobilize, the 85% that is still not being initiated, as part of corporate wellness programs in this example. And so one of the things that, we've been seeing is really the power of social well-being. And this is a theme that is gaining significance, in our observation over the last many years, accelerated during the pandemic. I mean, as human beings, very simply, we are social animals, right? We want to be with people, around people, connected to people. It's all about our physical, mental well-being, about physical, mental well-being of people around us. And it's ultimately socially well communities are the ones that are really able to drive, outcomes and growth for businesses, communities, and so on. So I think the question that, we have been attempting to answer and continue to do so is that this aspect of social well-being, how can that be translated in the form of a product, something that people can touch and feel and experience and participate and engage and so on. So, I just think health, wellness, community, purpose, all of it comes together under that theme. And it's really about the industry, technology companies, influencers to come together and sort of try and build some kind of a product framework structure around that.
I think, sorry, Chris, I was going to say,
No,
like,
you're right.
collaboration is just essentially important at the moment for entities that don't have a lot of money for a race. So you're putting a race on, or you've got a mass participation event that you want to do, you have to look just a little bit beyond your community to find out where the focus is. I think we just heard, like, in India, maybe it's for women, like the opportunities women. I think fitfluencing in the US is massive for women. It's huge. It's almost like that there's probably a tipping point at some stage where we're going, are we focusing too much on our kids being, the right sort of fit and the right sort of weight, and the, eating low calories, that sort of conversation is interesting. But there's a lot of collaborations that can be done between where you have major female fitness influencers. Kayla Itzine's being a massive one out of Australia who has global influence, but she doesn't do any she doesn't run. She's online with her activities, and her followers follow every movement. But if you take steps down, there are going to be those ones who will, like, you challenge them to run, you challenge them to participate in your events, and get them to bring their community with them, to have fun and be involved and raise money for a good cause. Perhaps it's a little bit more of collaborate or die sort of approach at the moment, because we've got to bring different areas together so we're not preaching to the converted all the time.
I love that, collaborate or die. Yeah, and certainly what I'm finding interesting in our industry, and one of the things I do is global updates, which happens twice a month, and I gave this week's one on Tuesday, and there were two themes that came out of it. One of them was the waning collaboration because people are kind of back into survival mode, having to put events on and so on. So all these people who willingly came together to help each other out in COVID are now, I'm too busy to collaborate, or you're now, whilst I paid lip service, and when we spoke to you in December in that wonderful interview you gave, Nikhil, you coined a phrase for it which escapes me, but this whole importance of, I think you said it was competitive collaboration, or you had a term which is in your book, and I'm hearing more and more, sadly, these alliances that sprung up, these coalitions that sprung up, and the minute the tap's being turned on, it's kind of back to a dog eat dog in some markets, and we're missing, I believe, this enormous opportunity to be able to collaborate in that space. And then coming back to the corporate one, what was interesting, predominantly in Asia as well, the feedback from the different sources was that business is coming back, but not in the traditional way in terms of the mass events they're putting on. But, someone out of Singapore, a 6,000 people running event for one client wanting to get their staff healthy and active. I mean, in many countries, a 6,000 people running event is an enormous event. And there's corporates that are saying, we want to invest in getting our people back to be able to do these things. Let's come over to you, Scott. It's been a while since you've had a chance to speak, and obviously, street hockey, health and wellness, purpose. How does that come into there, and the technology that you're building to re-engage with that event?
Well, some of the words that have been shared by other members of the panel that have kind of resonated with me have been community and have been, I love that initiate the uninitiated, but for us, we're a team-based event. So 9 players on a team. And historically, a captain would essentially register for the team. We wouldn't capture the data of the 8 other players on the team. And I guess as we've evolved, we recognized, and this is what I want to focus on, the power of an invitation. When we talk about community, and the power of technology, of course, which, a team will take 4, 5, 6 months as it organizes, but an event only happens on a weekend. But in the 4, 5, 6 months in advance, there's opportunity for, engagement through technology, and especially these invitations. And of course, we love it when we get an invitation on Facebook or whatever, and we, are able to connect with a friend. But it's a whole other level when a person invites us to do something and there's an action involved. And so we've been focusing our technology development on invitations, and the invitation between a captain and players. And then, as you've talked about, Chris, and as we build larger communities, the invitation between our players and fans. And there's really an opportunity then to capture the data and better understand not just those playing in an event, but those who are engaged with those who are playing in the event. And as we, are able to focus on those invitations and doing them right, we can capture, the data of an entire community. And it starts with that, like I was saying earlier, 13-year-old, 14-year-old individual who's supported by parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends and coaches and teachers. But, then these fans can also extend further invitations and collectively raise money for a cause that the community cares about. So, these are things that we're focused on from an event standpoint. But really at the core, it's about building that community and that social purpose and that health and wellness, because all of these things are related. I mean, youth mental health is a very important part of health and social wellness. So these are some of the things that we're working on, and really, the things shared by our panel collectively have, really kind of resonated with me as I've thought about what we're doing.
Thanks, Scott. Carolyn, how about you? I mean, you spoke about some of that Liverpool stuff in terms of, the fans and the opportunity for the fans, that ripple effect there. Any sense of how, the passionate fan that gets up in Asia and all hours of the night to watch, but, is there engagement that goes beyond that to, if you use the mass participation parlance, the friend, the children, are there any kind of tips that might be relevant as to how you brought the broadest circle of that fan into be engaged?
Yeah, I guess it's a really interesting topic, and I wanted to sort of pick on something you said, Chris. You said, are we providing the health and wellness? Whether that's with the Liverpool Football Partnership, whether it's a sponsorship of a marathon, and I would ask, are we actually providing it in the right way? And this is a little bit left field, and it may be too much of a tenuous link for if you've got sort of small events, etc. But and I'm coming at this from two angles. One is sort of the corporate partner lens. If a corporate partner like Standard Chartered is going to engage and pay, good sponsorship dollars to be involved in an event that has a health and wellness element, because we know our data points tell us that our clients are involved in health and wellness. What's our USP? How are we going to do that differently? So I'm coming at it from that lens, but also, since I finished up with Standard Chartered last year, I took sort of 3 months out, and I thought, if I'm not going to earn during this period, I've got to learn. And I decided to learn on health and wellness and sustainability. So I'm hugely passionate about this subject as well. Anyway, I've identified a trend, which you would all know about, but it sort of made me think, is this something that, would be interested for corporates? Is it something that could potentially be applied to mass participation events? So when you think of health and wellness, health is a body free from disease, right? And the wellness aspect of that is the active process of achieving that. So that's what is that healthy lifestyle? So I think there's going to be, and we're seeing signs of it already. And Melissa, it's huge in the US, and you would know about this, but I think there's going to be a seismic shift in the health and wellness space. And there's a move from more traditional medicine to functional medicine. Now, I don't think it's going to happen quickly, because it's quite a controversial space. But if you think about, you get sick, like I suffer from migraines. I have for years. Suffer from migraines. I go to the doctor. He treats my symptoms. He sends me off with a script and gives me migraine drugs. And next time I go, he asks, did they work? How did it go? He never asked me, what am I eating? What are my sleeping habits like? How am I living my lifestyle, etc. So then I found a functional medicine doctor in Melbourne, and there's not many of them. And functional medicine doctors are doctors. And I know this is a bit left field, but I think there must be a way where we can link it into these mass participation events. So I then found this functional medicine doctor who then looked at it and said, okay, the philosophy is food is medicine, not drugs. Food is medicine. Lifestyle is medicine. So how can, mass participation events really tap into that functional medicine approach? Because I think, it's coming. It's going to be very slow, because pharmaceutical companies don't like it. Insurance companies don't like it, because they're making money out of, you consuming large amounts of drugs. But I'm a massive believer in this approach. And I just think there must be a way that this whole philosophy of functional medicine, because when we talk about health and wellness, that's it. It's about looking at the root cause. So instead of waiting till you get sick and going to a doctor, it's about working with a practitioner that can get to the root cause. And I think there must be a way and so just one other thing on that, because I am passionate about it, I thought, what are the technologies in this space that can help me in my own personal health and wellness journey? And I found I found a test called 23andMe, and it's a DNA genetic test, which have become hugely popular. And what it does is, it's not for everyone because it is quite confronting. So it's a saliva test. You send it off. I had to do it in the US because it's not developed enough in Australia. But this might be something that we could bring into mass participation events as well. And what it does is it maps your genes and it gives you a report, and it tells you, fortunate in that I didn't have any bad news in the report, and that's why it can be a little bit confronting. But what it did show me, it showed me what am I, in terms of that health and wellness, what is my body predisposed to heart disease? Am I predisposed to? It's a very sort of, I guess, sophisticated way of looking at it, a way that, would require big budgets. But if there's a way mass participation events can look at health and wellness from that perspective, getting to the root cause, functional medicine, understanding, giving clients or participants or spectators the opportunity to understand their body.
Caroline's frozen there. Let's
Just got Australian broadband. That's the
Australian broadband.
Yeah.
I'm conscious you've got to drop off in another 4 or 5 minutes. So love to come back to you and then come back to the rest of the group once a couple of kind of final thoughts from you.
Look, I think what you asked me in the beginning was like, for my experience as a someone in digital, from the ability to get more people to an event through digital. But I actually I'm gonna jump on what this theme is coming, is like that idea of collaborating or doing something different. I've worked for Meta for 4 years, and I've now moved to SailGP, and SailGP is essentially it's just moving out of its startup phase, right? 2 years. What both of those companies have done, and what a lot of startups have done, is actually it sort of segues exactly what Caroline was saying. At Meta, I was incentivized to join a gym. I was incentivized because they paid for it. I was incentivized to buy a bike because they paid for it. I mean, not every company can do that. But what people started doing on their own is, once they bought their new sneakers and were able to claim it back through these like there's massive programs where you can you can buy a certain type of, like, it has to be a running shoe. I can't go and buy a Balenciaga running shoe. It's like, there's certain types of running shoes that I could buy, and the company would reimburse me for that and would go into a program. What then ended up is, like, the groups of people that I worked with, they organized like their own running clubs, because now you got the running shoes or the bike or whatever, you have no more excuse, there's no excuses. And then people were sort of judging themselves, or, posting their times, or talking about it more within the company. So I do think that this is important. At SailGP, it's on a different scale, obviously, but the incentivization is to get everyone into a gym, not into a gym, but everyone living that healthy life. And they pay for like LifeWorks or these different programs. There is no reason why an entity could offer free entry or discounted entry into an event. That is a legitimate way of, like, and the company reimburses, because, and then once one person does it, when we talk about micro influencers, how many more people within the company will enter that event because they got a discounted rate of entry, or they got a free pair of shoes from the sponsor, or those sorts of things. That has been the biggest influence on mine and my kids' fitness journey while we're in the US, because our health insurance didn't pay for that. Our health insurance paid if we broke our leg doing it, but the company definitely paid and encouraged us to take on activity, like down dog discount, join yoga discount, mass participation events should probably really look into that sort of, there's, if you ride your bike to work now companies will, have a bike rack or give you, Sale GP's purpose is so strong that we register our carbon footprints. Did we ride our bikes to work? Did we drive a car to work? Did we take the train? That all goes into like an overall registry of like our company reducing its own carbon footprint through being powered by nature, which is the motto. And I think there is something massive in there that smaller entities or mass participation events can tap into. And if it's offering, my daughter started triathlon, then the COVID hit, became very difficult to find clubs to run with. It became difficult to find events to enter in. But now we're coming out of that. If the Tri Club was discounted somehow, or the equipment, we'd be straight back into it. She lost the momentum. I don't know if she will get back into it, but that's important way of tapping into that corporate life. And corporations are looking for ways to bring people together while we're all working remotely. So it's definitely, my experience of working for a massive technology company has changed my mind about their responsibility to me to keep me fit and healthy while we're doing those really long days with high stress, outcomes.
Yeah, and I'm conscious, Melissa, that you've got to jump off. So let me say thank you and jump away when you need to. But some great insights. Thanks for joining us and making the time. And maybe we take that one back to the corporate level and bring it back to you, if I may, Nikhil, and kind of, bye Melissa, overlay the commercial lens to this of these event organizers. I think so often there's still this people coming to look for a partnership with a gold, silver, and bronze package, as bizarre as that may seem in this day and age, as opposed to saying, well, and even if they go a little bit more sophisticated than that, so often it's around sales and it's around branding and it's that, as opposed to, and I coined the phrase the other day with Ashish, a kind of a whole of business approach. So understanding, this is the package that I got. Let me understand across your business where this might be able to impact. And it comes down to staff, potentially comes down to clients and suppliers. So how is you as a corporate working in collaboration, which Melissa was talking about, could create a real partnership that brings that in? Have you seen any examples of that or got any ideas around that?
I think the example is still emerging, but I think the point of view I have is, I think, when you think about employees, and I'll just pick up what Melissa had talked about, right? The organization's responsibility towards employees, right? And what last 2-3 years have done is that, we all sitting in the living rooms of our employees now, right? There's no degree or differentiation left between what's office and what's work. And, the families of the employees are now known to the managers and vice versa, right? So I think the whole HR manual is being rewritten as to how do we engage and look after our employees. And it's no longer about economics, right? I mean, salary is important, but it's about what they care for, which is a purpose. Everybody has a purpose in their life, right? And it could be supporting a particular charity, supporting a particular cause, or, particular community, and their wellness, right? Which is kind of almost now on the top of the list. So as we talk to event organizers, and even in the past when I used to, partner with these events as a sponsor, I always was that, signage is not something which is exciting, right? Signage just happens to be there, whether if it's a running event or an Ironman. It's good to have, but that is not the goal and objective, right? The goal objective is you're getting your employees, you're getting your customers, you're getting them out there, one, for the purpose of making them healthy and giving them their passion and getting them engaged with the community, and two, you want to continuously help them collaborate post the event, right? Because people are meeting, and think of it as more of a networking opportunity, because again, when you have thousands of people who come together from different parts, different walks of life, now you have a ecosystem, and don't let it go to waste. And that's where the value of a partnership or a sponsorship comes in, right? That how does one take all the ingredients of getting thousands of people together on a given day for a common purpose, maybe it happens to be running, and then build upon and make sure these people are connecting with each other, right? And that's where the power of digitization comes in, right? When you think about like all the social media combined and all the online handles combined, this is a physical opportunity to bring them, now digitally together, right? And that's where I think I hope the models emerge, because that's where the value creation happens, especially now because people are meeting less, and whenever they're going to meet in these events, they're coming by choice. They're not being forced, right? It's a passion. Now they're coming by choice, and how do we add the other element to it, right? It's like almost you're creating a kind of a semi-business and semi networking community out of that, and that's where the role of digitizing plays very important. And one other thing I wanted to add was that this purpose which was mentioned before, right? I think historically what event organizers do is they force a purpose. They say, oh, I'm supporting these 2-3 charities, please help me support this, right? And I think that has to be flipped around, because I may want to support cancer research because I had a family member who lost life to a cancer, and somebody may want to support something around disability because they have something, they know somebody or they've gone through it. So I think giving the choices of the purpose back to the stakeholders who are the participants and combining with the cause is very important, because otherwise, normally these events, they kind of can this thing and here's the 2 things and do support it. And people are like, okay, I'll come there, but it's not like I have a passion to support this purpose.
I love that you share that, Nikhil. I'll just jump in quick because that is really important. I think for us as an event operator, I mean, we used to select a charity each year and kind of designate that this was our charity of choice across Canada. And we forced everybody to raise for that particular charity. And one year we might raise $100,000, the next year maybe 200. And we saw that, some people just don't want to donate to certain charities. But if we give them the opportunity themselves and we use technology to facilitate that, then we can raise potentially significantly more funds because we give the individuals the choice of who they care about, who they want to raise for. So yeah, we're doing exactly what you suggested. I mean, we're launching it tonight in Canada, but we'll have some data points for you and for others to let you know how this goes. But I love that you shared that. And I'm a GoDaddy customer, by the way.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think that's commendable, because I think that's where I feel like you're truly unlocking the people's passion, and then they feel like they're doing something meaningful by just giving them their choice rather than forcing a choice.
Well, historically, so many mass participation events are actually created by charities, and so they're doing it for, at least in Canada, they're doing it for the purpose of raising funds for their cause. But when events come up organically and they're not linked directly to that charity, then it's better to give the participants and their fans a choice. I think this is really key.
And I think and I see Ashish coming in there, but I just want to pick up on that choice bit as well, because I think in this typical world of race and event focus, we think we give participants a choice because they can choose a marathon, a half marathon, a 5K or a 10K. But everything else is kind of like choose your t-shirt design is probably as much other choice as you get. But and we'll play a little clip in the moment from the focus group, and one of the things that Sandeep spoke about, we called him an independent runner. He doesn't participate in events as a rule, but he said, what I love, it gives me the opportunity to participate on my terms, using technology fundamentally when I want to, where I want to, not at the whim of any event organizer who tells me I have to turn up on this day, I have to be there at this time, I have to run this distance, and so on. And it gives so much choice in so many different ways as we bring more and more of this digital and technology into it. And with that, let's come up to you, because your platform creates exactly that, Ashish, and you've got some really interesting data points already in the early stages.
Yeah, Chris, before that, since Caroline, Melissa, as well as Nikhil all spoke about corporate, I just wanted to, add that there's something that, we are seeing happen within the corporate sector, which is most leadership, HR heads are trying to really bring together employees and the social responsibility aspects, on one page, right? Where clearly there's an employee engagement, employee wellness aspect, which is about their better productivity, and so on and so forth. But also, I think the whole cause and charity aspect which pretty much in many parts is an independent, siloed, fragmented piece. I think there couldn't be a better time for technology to come in to sort of see how these things can come together, because corporate sector alone can just be a very large sort of mobilizer of people. So with that, on the charity aspect, I mean, I just, what we've been seeing, again, clearly there is significant opportunity on the corporate front we spoke about. And again, Nikhil would know this, but in India, for example, 2% of profits have to be deployed towards corporate social responsibility. So I think most organizations are sort of thinking, these are large sums of money. How can I have my employees, my stakeholders, my customers involved in the good that I do for society? So that's really, a point of backdrop. Charity organizations, and again, I talk more about India, there are, large number of them who may not have the resources and the wherewithal to organize, fundraising events themselves. And you know what? Fundraising cannot really be the end of it for them. They can't quite just go and say, I need the money. Of course, we need the money, right? Very often to survive as a nonprofit. But the question really is that how can wellness become a tool? And I use that word deliberately. How can wellness become a tool for such, NGOs to be able to connect with donors, beneficiaries? And again, if there are technology solutions that emerge, I think it'll serve that purpose of bringing cause, wellness, social well-being together.
Ashish, I'd love you. I mean, while you're on there, corporate, you had an amazing example, and I'm just picking up my notes of, was Oracle, wasn't it, in terms of the what they were looking for and the outcomes that they were creating.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Thanks for reminding me. So, as we speak with corporates, there are some standard solutions. Wellness is important. Charity is important. Can we integrate the two, and so on and so forth? But what really came up in this conversation was, it's not about raising funds for charity from employees, right? It is about volunteering. How can we create a culture within organizations which is really about staying well and keeping your community well, keeping the causes close to your heart well? To Nikhil's point, different people have different causes which are close to their heart. So I maybe it is early stages. I don't know, this is definitely more relevant for India. My other panelists can talk about how it relates in other geographies. But how can such initiatives bring in a volunteering culture is also, an emerging trend that we are starting to see in companies.
Thank you, Ashish. I'm interested just to move a little bit to some of the things that you discovered there, Scott, when you had your challenge. You went and you identified 14 things that were a problem, and one of the things that you shared was the comment you made to me was third-party platforms lacking tech designed to serve the interest of the tech and not the event. So we got people sitting on the call who might be a smaller event. We've had some great big ticket examples here with Standard Chartered in Liverpool and Sale GP with multi-million-dollar budgets, and you're building your own platform. But interested to hear what your take on that was. If you didn't go off and build your own platform, what were some of the challenges you found, and maybe some of the solutions that you considered as possible opportunities? And just quickly before you go, Nikhil unfortunately has to drop off. Maybe one key takeaway as you go, Nikhil, that you'd like to leave before we come back to Scott.
Yeah, sorry, Scott. Sorry to take. I just wanted to go, but I think you touched upon, Chris. I think the takeaway is, this mad rush of people to go back to the offline world and forget what it was to be online, right? Because I think you touched upon it, because everybody is now forgotten. Oh, that, yeah, digital was great, I need to have it, but now let me get out and do everything and forget about digitization, not consciously but subconsciously. And I think the key here will be that keep that in mind, that the world will keep start and stop and start and stop. I think this is going to be the way forward. And it's not like, it was a bad dream and it's going to be over, right? We already see that, right? I mean, with the, now the monkeypox situation coming, and versions of, unfortunately, COVID keeps emerging and other situations. So I think as both digital players as well as the event organizers, I think there is this reminding us and just continues reinforcing the fact that that this is here to stay, and that how we should not. I mean, this is an opportunity, right? When it's not raining, it's the perfect time to build a roof, and I think that's where we are right now, right? That it's an okay time to start optimizing what we could not do in the last 2 years because it was all scrappy. We had to pull things together, right? And I think things like what Scott mentioned, right? I mean, those are great examples where they're already working on what would be the model of the future, in some sense, combining purpose, combining the passions, and it's a great time to actually go and talk to all these stakeholders, right? The participants, as to what their mindset is now, as to what they want out of events. Because I think the assumption is everybody assumes, oh, we're going to open these marathons and triathlons and people will rush to it. Maybe not, because people have changed, evolved, and they want different things. They still want to do it, right? So I think one, making time to really unpack where the mindset is now, what they want out of these events, and also continuously building on these digital, success factors, because it's here to stay. And I think, unfortunately, there is this like bad memory, or that was one time thing, is emerging in.
Thanks very much, Nikhil. Great, really great to see you again. Thanks for making the time. And yeah, that whole point about we make these assumptions, and rather than going and asking both the sponsor and the participant and the rest of the ecosystem, what do they really want?
Great, thank you, Chris. Thanks
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Come back to you, Scott, there, and then I'd love to come back over to you, Caroline.
Well, your question for me, Chris, was just about the tech, and my observation about tech companies being, operating in the interest of the tech, which of course is sensible. They're going to act according to their own best interests. As an event director, however, what we were experiencing is, well, we needed registration technology, we needed team management technology, we needed volunteer management technology, we needed referee management technology, we needed scheduling technology, and all kinds of different companies do some of these things, but they all do them in ways that don't necessarily work perfectly for the event. And each of them takes 1 or 2% of the event's profit margin. And so when you add them all up, you're giving away 10%, sometimes up to 12% of your revenues to pay for the cost of the tech. And when you give it all away to the tech, you don't have anything left over for yourself. And for something that allows the event to be sustainable. And I think this is one of the big assumptions that some of the tech industry have made about sports events generally, or amateur sports events, or mass participation sports generally, is that these events are just always going to continue to exist. And our problem is not, we don't need to save an extra few dollars on costs. We have a revenue problem, and this is what I think Nyasha says, like, how does this potential for increased digital engagement get monetized? Well, like, we need a way to monetize, the communities that we create and the events that we deliver. And so, that really was the problem facing us a few years ago. And fortunately, I mean, it turned out to be an opportunity. We hit our problems before COVID, and have had a couple extra years, to kind of get ahead of maybe the industry a little bit, to kind of have to develop the solutions that would solve our business model. But essentially, that was the problem that we were seeing with the technology companies, that they serve their own interests and they didn't really serve truly, the revenue needs of the event.
Thanks, Scott. And Caroline, yeah, one of the things to come to you and just to put these two on there is, I think, the great point that Nikhil made of asking people what they want. And I'd love to hear, what do you think sponsors want, and how does digital play into that? And I'd like to find a way to kind of segue into data. And we had the data or data conversation, depending on how you are, way back in China 5-6 years ago, where you said, you had all these events that were coming to you, trying to sell you, and they didn't have a basic understanding of their fans or their participants. So, how is that potentially monetizable? And what is it that sponsors are looking for that might be different now compared to what it was in 2019 and earlier, that presents a digital and technology opportunity for these events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just Yeah, I just want to sort of finish off on that sort of health and wellness thing that, as I said, I know sort of what I was proposing was quite blue sky and big picture, but if you ask your participants, what they want in that health and wellness space, everyone wants to live longer, right? So if there's a way that our mass participation platforms can help educate people on how they can live longer, and it is by that shift from traditional medicine to looking at the root cause, and it might be by bringing partners in. So be open-minded about your sponsor portfolio instead of just looking for banks, etc. If the health and wellness space, if all the data points are pointing to that, this is a trend that's going to be huge, and it's going to be a seismic shift in the industry. So I know sort of when I was talking about it before, it probably came across as, oh my God, I'm just trying to keep my event alive. Our industry is decimated. But if we go back to the data points, and if we go back to what's important for our clients, it's to live longer. And how can they live longer? And this is a way that we could help them. And maybe you could do it through partners. So I just really wanted to reinforce that point. So that just ask people to think about that. And I'm happy to sort of have offline conversations with anyone on that topic because I'm very passionate about it. But then secondly, I guess, once, just on your point, Chris, yes, we've discussed this a lot of times, right? Data points. I think a lot of events have rich data, but it's the mining, it's the data mining. It's finding out, what's the relevant information from that data that won't just, I guess, steer the event, but it will drive the event. It will grow the event. And as Chris said, I would have, as global head of sponsorship for a big bank, big budgets, I would have sponsorship decks come across my table constantly. And I used to get a little bit frustrated, to be honest, because they would be the gold package, brown package, gold, silver, brown, no, sorry, the brown would be terrible, gold, silver, platinum, etc. And, the opening line would often be, we know exactly what you want, our event's perfect for you. But then when I read what they think exactly what we want, it wasn't exactly what we want. So, they hadn't done their research, they hadn't looked at our points. So I guess that's, in terms of that data piece, it's really, really important that if you are sort of pitching to partners and trying to get new sponsors on board, you've got to think about what is that richness of data? What is the data points that this commercial partner wants? How can we get that information from our participation base, etc.? Because it's super important. And we did a lot of work with Liverpool Football Club on that, because they've got thousands of fans all around the world. But they weren't, they're in a great position now, but they haven't always known about their client base. They haven't known enough about their client base. So as a sponsor, I'm going, okay, I'm a bank, Liverpool Football Club, we pay you a lot of money. I want to get X amount of new retail clients in this market. But because they hadn't done their own data capturing and then data mining in the right way, they weren't able to provide that. So that was a journey that we worked on together. So I think, particularly if you're a small event pitching sponsors, just do your homework. Do make sure that you put the time in and you are trying to make it as bespoke as possible, and think about the richness of that data. What are the data points that you can offer a big corporation, and is it in line with what their objectives are?
Thanks, Caroline. Let's Ashish, I'd love to why don't we just play that other video quickly, and then we can talk a little bit about the, again, we spoke about asking the participants. This is from a technology perspective, and then we'll come back and talk about that and continue the conversation.
I think I found the digital means is giving me that flexibility to participate and in some sense contribute on my terms, not on the terms of the organizers, not on the terms of that event, but on my terms a bit. It's much more flexible. I think I'm reminded of my son. He's 24 years old. And so he says, I go online, I search for whoever is available, and there are groups available, and I say, can I join you? And he joins them and he plays online. Right now, for the Gen Z, in some sense, it's that part which is, the gamification part in some sense. They don't have trouble connecting to strangers.
It takes some adjustments, but, I'm kind of enjoying it. Running on Zwift, it's not the same as running with a friend, but it's a way to be socializing.
I think there needs to be some linkage between technology and activation, getting people active. And I think we're missing a massive trick in that space at the moment. So
I'm now on my third generation of Garmin, but I use it more for statistics. I'm anal about knowing how far I went, how fast I went. My cardiologist demands that I know what my heart rate is at all times, but I don't want text while I'm running. I don't want phone calls while I'm running. I don't want my watch to be telling me what music I want to listen to.
Yeah, so over to you around the data space, and again, we were talking about what you've been doing in early stages and the power of data already. Can you maybe give some examples there for us, please, Ashish?
Yeah. So I think before data, what I'm seeing and what we're really observing is that this is a great time. Of course, it's a time when the entire industry is sort of changing direction, or there is a potential to change direction, where technology and digital, which was maybe superficial earlier, becomes far more integrated into business strategies, business models going forward. And clearly, data is one important aspect of it. Of course, each platform, each event will determine what is valuable data for them. I mean, in our case, because of our community first, approach to things, some of the data that we thought was going to be great value, and early indications are that is the right thinking, is when people come together and when they are able to have their achievements visible to their community. It may be a small or a large community. I think the motivation, the drive for people to do more increases. That's something that we've seen. Just to give you an example, we worked with a financial services player in the country where they had an X number of participants from a couple of their functions. Almost 75% people were active, right? But what is more exciting is that more than 80% of that 75% far exceeded the pledge distance that they had. We have a structure by which there is a pledge distance that you will do within 30 days and your actual. Most of the people, 80% of them were like 2x, 3x of their pledge distances. So, this is just one example of data in the context of what we are doing. So, of course, different organizations will determine the contours and boundaries of data that make sense for them.
So that, again, as to how that's kind of relevant to the industry, you have these people that are coming up pledging to participate in a distance on a journey, and because they're part of a digital community and have these kind of almost accountability groups, people are pledging that they're going to run, for example, 100 kilometers in a couple of weeks, and some of them were 3xing that. So how this opportunity, it would seem, for the traditional mass participation industry that ask people to sign up, they go up and train, they've obviously got training programs, and then they come and run the event. This opportunity to engage with them, help them overachieve in their training as they get to the event, because they're part of that community. You're getting data points along the way that are valuable to potentially sponsors, the rest of the community, and that presents a potential commercialization opportunity, is what you seem to be saying.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I think, this is also a good time, I feel, for experimentation. For example, a 10K and a 21K, etc., has its own place, and that's great. But, the minute you sort of open it up, back to my earlier point, the uninitiated, people who do shorter distances and so on, we've been seeing that they are pleasantly surprising, right, in terms of setting a goal, but far exceeding that. So yeah, that's really the value of data in this context, in this example.
Thank you, folks. We've only got a few minutes left. I just want to grab a couple of the comments and questions. There's one there from Nyasha How does this potential for increased digital engagement get monetized? Can you guys give specific examples? And I think we've touched on that a little bit. Scott, you touched on that. It's about understanding your audience. It's about better engagement. It's about opportunities to potentially deliver more to partners, whether you call them sponsors or partners. I prefer to call them partners, and that genuine collaboration. The point that Caroline made there, even around Liverpool, a big organization like that, without the data, I so often have seen, and it's a comment that I've made for a number of years, these relatively small events partnering with a big organization that has the ability to mine that data, but this fear of, well, if we give them our data, we're breaking privacy, data protection rules and all those kind of things. But my sense is that there have to be these opportunities to say, let's agree in collaboration, coming back to, again, what Melissa said, what is it that the rights holder needs, and what is it that the brand needs, and can we use the rights holder, if we don't have the resources ourselves, to help mine that data to deliver benefits for everyone. And as I think Caroline would attest to, more and more brands are moving towards performance-driven partnerships as well. It's not a big multi-million dollar or hundreds of thousands of dollar check up front and move on. It's it's this for the rights, and it's all these extra top-ups for delivering on a bunch of agreed KPIs. And I think this industry has that amazing opportunity around that we have willingness to engage with us, willingness to, they have to sign up. They need to give us their details. They want to be engaged with us. Anything to add on that in terms of the commercialization, monetization, before I just quickly go to Noor's comments here?
I think it's quite sort of simple, understanding where your client sits on the trajectory of knowing you, understanding you, and then liking you, and then making sure that you've got the right data, you're capturing the right data points, and that you're mining it in the right way, and then moving clients along that journey.
Love that. Thank you. Knowing, understanding, and liking. Thanks, Caroline. And so thank you for all the insights from the panelists. I just wanted to add, during the time when Parkrun did not run for a considerable period of time due to the pandemic and the lockdowns, in the UK, Partrunners participated in the Not Parkrun initiative and were able to record one activity per day if they wished, and their fastest time each week could be included in a weekly results table. Many Parkrunners engaged with this initiative as a way to have mental as well as social well-being. Self-motivation is key. In line with functional medicine that Caroline mentioned, in the UK, some GPs now prescribe Parkrun, a good way forward.
And I read an article about a Scottish doctor that actually, as not prescribing drugs, is saying you need to have half an hour walk in nature every day. And it's actually on a prescription.
Yeah. No, starting to hear more of that. Folks, I think we're pretty well out of time. I don't see any other questions or comments, but maybe just one, as we wrap it up, one point from each of you, one key takeaway, against the backdrop of digital and technology first, recognizing that our audience is mostly from the events industry. What would be one takeaway that you'd give to them to focus on in terms of a digital and technology first strategy? Maybe we start with you, Scott, and then come to Caroline and end up with you, Ashish, if that's okay.
Well, Chris, in the lead up, you mentioned gamification, and we didn't get a chance to talk much about that. But I think really when it comes to monetizing these events through digital, that really is key. And not just digital gamification, but actual in-person, gamification. Like, in our case, we run events, they're games. And we can leverage those games to actually drive not just impressions, like the digital marketing agency drives impressions, but events can do more than that. We can leverage our audience to actually drive sales. And I think that's what really is what every corporate partner sponsor really wants, is revenues. And so these events have power within them through gamification to drive not just impressions, but sales.
Great point. Yeah, thank you. Caroline? You're muted still, Caroline.
Just in line with what Scott said, actually, that, as I touched on before, you know, for a big bank, that sort of COVID revolutionized, I guess, the way that we were managing our sponsorships, and we sort of pivoted 100% digital. And we knew, you know, it did great things for us. It broadened our reach, it increased our engagement. It allowed us to do much more sort of immersive and innovative events. We're able to measure easily. It also allowed us to have that evergreen content, which we didn't have before. But having said that, you know, physical events, the memorable connections, it can't be replaced. It absolutely can't be replaced. And we saw it with our own community in LFC. You know, LFC Liverpool Football Club were going through one of the most incredible periods of their history. And because we couldn't get clients or even senior management to Anfield to see, you know, that face-to-face, we lost a lot of that passion. We lost a lot of that understanding of the power of sponsorship. So I think you need to land somewhere in the middle. You need to know when to dial up. Understand what you've learned from the digital piece, and it is all those things, evergreen content, etc. Keep your physical, but then know when to dial it up and to bring them together in terms of hybrids.
Thank you. And you know, that evergreen content is I think something that is so overlooked in our industry. I mean, I was watching some of the amazing Liverpool stuff just yesterday, you know, the Shankly story, and you know, I'm a lifelong Liverpool fan, and you know, our industry has incredible stories, and I think so often that, you know, the content is focused around the elite participants and whatever, but you know, we have so much amazing content that doesn't cost a fortune to produce, that can in many cases be user generated, and that enables to build that engagement that I think is so often an overlooked opportunity. I think there's this real fear is almost the right term in so many parts of the industry. I don't have the budget, I don't have the technology to be able to do it, but there's these amazing opportunities to build that engagement with that evergreen content.
Yeah, and I think just one other thing, that evergreen content, it doesn't need to be polished. That's the other thing that we learned. So, you know, big bank, big budgets, we would brief in TBWA, and the briefing would be, you know, I'd walk in the room and there'd be 100 people from the agency, and I'd be like, oh my God, you know, just dollar signs. So we shifted as well, because we had to become like a consumer brand. We had to become like a Red Bull. We had to produce content, get it out the door, and we couldn't do it in the old style where you're writing a brief, and you know, you've got a tissue box session, and you've got all these, you know, buzzwords I never even understood half the time, and it would take you 6 months. We had to get content out, you know, because it was. And what happened, which was fascinating, when COVID hit, Standard Chartered and Liverpool, we both hit the pause button. We were like, how are we going to handle this? You know, it's a very difficult world out there now. What's the right content? What tone do you go at? And while we were sitting there discussing this, the players stepped up. And, you know, Mohamed Salah, and all of a sudden you've got the players creating content from their lounge room. So it changed what consumers wanted to digest in terms of content. So, you know, the club and the sponsor were sitting there going, oh my God, look at this content that's going out by Mohamed Salah. It's brilliant, it's raw. So then we started shooting stuff on iPhone. And so that evergreen content, it doesn't need to be polished, and it can be repurposed over and over again.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you. Ashish, let's give you the final word, your key takeaway or recommendations, suggestions.
Yeah, the final takeaway, Chris, from my perspective would be that, you know, while clearly events, the race directors will continue to do a fantastic job of the movements that have been created under these events, you know, making sure health and wellness is taken to large numbers of people. But really the question for, you know, technology companies, events, and the consumers and the users really is, how can we democratize? I mean, how can we have, I know this may seem just like a concept for the future, how can we have a race director in every street, in every household? I mean, in a sense, where technology now can, you know, allow people to influence the health and wellness of people that they care about. Now, I may have an influence on 5 people, someone may have an influence on 5,000, but that's all right. I mean, how can we have technology really, you know, enable health and wellness for the masses?
I love that. A race director in every street and every household. And you know, again, that's, you know, it doesn't mean that there don't have to be, you know, as Caroline's already touched on, these amazing in-person events that are so important. But those mini race directors, those mini communities that we spoke about earlier, that, you know, there's many of them that come to the spoke at the hub at the center of the spokes, and that's maybe the event. But there's this opportunity to create this engagement in the digital and using technology, and hopefully more monetizable ways. Folks, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for going the distance, particularly you, Caroline. It's after 11:30 at night. They're wonderful to catch up again. Thanks so much. Thank you, Scott. Have a great day. Ashish, rest well. And thanks to everyone who's stayed with us. Hope it's been valuable to you. And we'll see you next month. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.